What I really don't understand is how this guy managed to get on top of a roof which was only about 400 yards or so away from President Trump. And it's right to call him President Trump because he's a previous president, isn't it, Al? So if I turn this around, you can see our learned friend Alan Robertshaw from
Hello.
Art of Law. And yes, it rhymes, we all know that. So if you haven't noticed, we're here together, and we just thought we'd show you a little bit about how we set up our stuff here. So literally, we've come and sat on the rocks here, and we've got our setup. You can see Al's tripod over there, and we can pan to a shot of Al's camera there as well. I'm here on holiday, and it's nice to come here and see how you doing, Al?
I'm doing very well, because of course I get to live here all the time, which is rather nice. And regular Art of Law viewers, that's another channel, may have noticed that this is one of my favourite filming spots, because I'm very keen on composition. And this is quite a nice one, because all you art students can look out there and notice the convergent lines, and I'm very big on my rule of thirds. Because you've probably also noticed I do a lot of shooting at churches and old tin mine engine sheds. Why is that? Well, it's because, apart from the fact they're very pretty, they have a very strong vertical and horizontal component, which makes it very easy for framing. Which I appreciate isn't the question Dan asked, which is it correct to refer to former presidents as president? Yes, it is, unless the current president is there. So if it's like, for instance, when it was Nixon's funeral, you had President Obama and former presidents, Clinton, who else was there? The peanut guy. What's he called? That's terrible. Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
And things. So yeah, but the etiquette is, it's a bit like in the army, where any rank from captain or above you get to keep even after you have retired. It's the same. So it is correct to call Donald Trump President Trump. Do you think the security service has missed out? I mean, people have pointed this out, that what do you say to him? Because it looks really daft to say Donald Duck. Mr. Former President Duck.
Duck, Mr. Yeah. But yeah, no, coming back to the original question, so it's not actually clickbait, and I'm going to turn this way so you can enjoy the views of the horizon, but the original question, how did they miss it, Al? Because this is the question that everyone's asking, and there's lots of conspiracy theories thrown up. Was it planned? Did he set this all up? Have they set it up? And I think the simple answer to all that is no. I mean, this can't possibly be a setup. Let's pretend to get SHOT'd, and
Well, let's face it. If this had been a setup, they'd have arranged it at that landscape gardening place again, wouldn't they? That Four Seasons. But I can speak from a little bit of experience, because you may remember we had the G7 here a little while ago at Carbis Bay, and as it happens, a friend of mine lives right next to the hotel where they were actually having the summit, and they offered everybody on this little lane £40,000 to move out for the week, just because it would have made it security easier. Now my friend actually said, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to stay here. But we were just sort of there. This was before it even started and kicked off. They were just like prepping a couple of days before. And my friend's missus opened an upstairs window in their lovely house, and within seconds there were security people there. They were obviously just monitoring everything. I mean, we had HMS Tamar, which is one of our fantastic Royal Navy ships, and I love because it's in dazzle camouflage. That was offshore. You couldn't, within that, it was like a completely secure bubble all around this hotel. You could not get anywhere within line of sight of that hotel without being checked out. So I have to say, I am very, very surprised as to what has happened here. Now, the head of the Secret Service, she was actually meant to attend like a hearing on the 22nd, because there had been some complaints about the quality of the protection for former presidents. I gather that has now actually been brought forward, so she might have already gone to answer the questions. I mean, I don't know if that's an open or closed session. Presumably, because they're talking about operational security, it's probably a closed session, because you don't really want to be sort of discussing the details of the security. But I think there are serious questions to be answered here. I mean, normally I would never second guess experts like the security, the Secret Service, because obviously they know their job better than I do. But this seems a horrendous lapse, because that was the nearest location to the site that you could have sort of scoped a place out from. So if they arrive there and look around, presumably say, right, Because, they put their own snipers in position.
On the roof looking around, and they clearly had line of sight of the other roof. I mean, it's not as though this was a crowd greeting event where you got out of a vehicle, which in itself is its own thing, which at this point we'll plug our course with Polearm Academy, because there's a fantastic course with Polearm Academy. I'll link it in the description below. I'm one of the instructors there. Al, you've been on part of the course so far. Everything that we do on this course is to do with security and looking into protecting people and that sort of thing. And if you get right up in the course, we do things like VIP protection. And so even transferring from one vehicle to another or getting out of a vehicle, everything is covered. And you do it in either a diamond formation or whatever. There's various technicalities to it, but this is not like this was a crowd greeting event where he was getting out of a vehicle, going up to meet a line of people in a crowd, and someone leapt out of the crowd or something that they didn't anticipate. This was a fixed set event with a rooftop 400 yards away.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a tension between your principle, especially when it is something like a politician or a celebrity. They want to be able to, meet and greet and shake hands and things. And there is always that, who is in control? And the Secret Service make it very clear that, look, we are tasked with keeping you alive, so therefore just do what we say. I mean, we now have that absolutely iconic photograph, and kudos to the photographer who took that. Absolutely. He's already got one Pulitzer Prize, actually, so I think this will be his second one. What's really interesting about that is his camera was set up to live stream back to his editor. So he was just taking just snap. And then when they closed the site down and took everybody away to sort of see what was happening, he was actually in an area where there was no mobile signal for security reasons. So he actually didn't know he'd snapped that. He had a rough idea he'd snapped a very good shot, but he didn't realise just how that had suddenly gone all around the world. I mean, that is going to be one of those iconic photographs. And again, there's that thing where people are saying, oh, it must be a fit up, because the Secret Service would be dragging him away. But if he wants to stand there and go, yay, and shake his hand, I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, famously, he got, somebody had a pop at him while he was making a speech, and he carried on till the end of his speech, which gave him the reputation for being, the hardest guy alive. And I think, obviously, Trump is, if Trump's good at one thing, it is branding and the Trump brand. So,
But even that photograph was a subject of some sort of conspiracy stuff, because they said, how did they manage to get that photograph? It must be a, photo opportunity. I just think, that just has to be ridiculous, because, as you say, he was set up there already. There's probably dozens of cameras taking hundreds of photographs. They were bound to get that because of the frame rate. I mean, I had a camera nearly 10 or whatever 15 years ago that would do however many a dozen or whatever frames a second.
Effectively, he was shooting, and it was he was saying it was just shooting, almost like shooting video. But what he was lucky is it had a very good depth of field, which is why you've got like the flag in focus. Everything is there. Yeah. So but I mean, there's a reason like this guy has won Pulitzer Prizes. It's because he knows how to get a good photograph, and he has he said that as soon as he realised something was happening, he went, okay, Secret Service is going to bundle him. Where will they take him? Where's the exit route? And he'd already worked this out, that, if there's an emergency, they'll move him this way. And he moved himself into the position to anticipate that, the fact that they would drag Trump past him. So, this is the whole thing. It's all about planning, like coming to beautiful spots like this and, getting your framing right. But, I don't think that, I don't think there's any great conspiracy theories. I do think there are questions to be answered by the Secret Service. It's interesting they call them the Secret Service, even though they're highly public. But they were actually you like tangents and trivia. Why did the Secret Service look after the president? The answer is, when they decided the president needed a bodyguard, because in the old days, you could walk up to the president as he was walking around the park in Washington. The only federal agency that was anywhere nearby was the Secret Service, and their job was anti-counterfeiting. But they just happened effectively to have an office that was quite near. So it was like, okay, do you guys want to be responsible for presidential security? And that's how they got the gig. It was literally just a quirk of history and geography.
Yeah, no, to answer some of the, because a lot of people have asked now whether we're going to cover that, and, to answer that simply is no. In our view, it's just not some sort of set up or planned thing. But it is very strange. I mean, the question is there, and we don't have an answer to that. And the strange thing is, wasn't he also registered as a Republican?
Yeah, I mean, this is because people will look at the motive and stuff like that, and he was signed up to a particular YouTube channel and actually apparently was wearing that channel's T-shirt. This will be an interesting test of whether there is no such thing as bad publicity. I feel sorry for the guy who runs the YouTube channel. But the fact is, life does not have a narrative. Weird, quirky things happen. I mean, look at Archduke Ferdinand and Princeps and how that actually happened. If you were to read that in a fiction, in a movie, you'd go, well, that's completely unbelievable that could actually happen. But of course, that really did happen. And life is so full of things. I mean, and just to plug one of my other videos, these sorts of affairs, it was actually an attempt on an English Prime Minister that brought us the insanity rules that were applied everywhere, and I do have a video about this. But interestingly, they changed those after the Ronald Reagan attempt as well. So there is a bit of a link there between the law. I mean, who knows? I mean, people are describing this kid as a bit of a loner. When you read it, there's quite a lot of sort of dare I say it, incel type thing. He was apparently very concerned about his looks and stuff like that, and he was a bit of a loner. But apparently he was a very bright guy. He seemed like to be quite popular at school. But I remember speaking, because I used to do a lot of sort of, I think I mentioned before, our former head of Chambers used to introduce me as, this is Alan, he runs the paramilitary wing of Chambers, because I used to do a lot of sort of stuff for the military and forces and things like that. But the one thing that, all the experts say is, the only profile you can do about people like this is, there is no profile. It is really weird. Your classic weirdo loners do stuff like this, but so do completely happy family people, with good jobs and prospects and very popular and loving families. You just don't know what drives humans. And the fact is, I mean, to go back to after 7/7, after 7/7 in London, obviously London shut down and all the courts shut, so we just were in a pub. And we actually contacted a friend who works for the security services just to say, I suspect you'll be really, really busy now, but just to let you know we're in the pub. And he actually came around straight away and he said, for the first 48 hours, we ignore absolutely everything coming in. We collect it, but we don't try to analyse it, because for the first 48 hours, everything that's coming in, it's 90% noise. The signal to noise ratio is ridiculous. So we'll let it come in, because, his job was analysing, who did it and why they did it. And he said, there's no point trying to do it at this stage. He says, we'll get all the material in and we'll sit down next week and start filtering out when we actually know what's really happened. So, that's going to be the case with this. I mean, there'll be wild speculation all over the place, but it'll be weeks, if not months, before we actually get even a hint of a definitive answer.
It's just like when you get cases in the Crown Court, and everyone will think of a criminal, particularly with really heinous crimes, that they will have in their head a picture and a profile of what the person looks like and who's done it. But then when you see some of the cases and they walk in, they're just a businessman or an office guy or whatever, or woman, that you would see out and about in work, out in public, just perfectly normally acting person. You cannot make this up, and yet they're up for really heinous crimes, and it surprises you. However often you see it, it still surprises you. It takes you back and think, wow, you're guilty of this.
The flip side of that is, and this comes back to this, how can you represent somebody when you know they're guilty? Well, and I've said before, first of all, it's not our job to know whether they are or guilty. It's a jury's job to determine that. But I suspect everybody who's ever practiced at the criminal bar for any length of time has at least one tale of somebody who was clearly as guilty as sin, who then later turned out to be demonstrably innocent. I mean, first appearances are always dangerous. I mean, don't get me wrong, in a lot of crimes, you know, unlike in television drama, it nearly is always the obvious suspect. Actually, in 60% of, I'll say M cases, in case of the algorithm, but in 60% of M's, it's the emmerer who actually calls the police. So that's why the clear-up rate for that particular offence is very, very high. Although they always say if they've not figured out who did it within 24 hours, they'll never catch them. That's
interesting.
Yeah.
So those are our thoughts on that. No conspiracy, so far as we can see. We think it's something that's actually happened, but it is strange, and a big sort of gap as to what's happened. And I think ultimately, Elon Musk has called for the heads to be resigning, and I don't know if we'll see that, but I think some heads will roll. I think something will happen, and someone will probably be to blame, but who knows?
Well, and also there'll be an investigation, but because it's an operational security thing, a lot of that will, by necessity, have to be kept secret, because, and I think that will fuel the conspiracy theories. I mean, to go back to Kennedy, I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about Kennedy, but here's my thoughts on why that happened. At the time, that offence, even though it was the president, was not a federal offence. So the FBI had absolutely zero authority over that. And, there was a big row as to, where the investigation should be, and indeed where they kept, JFK at the time. And Jackie and all the people said, we need to get back to Washington. The only way they could do that is the FBI only had jurisdiction if it was a conspiracy involving somebody from a different state. So they said, well, we think actually he's just the shooter, and there's actually a wider plot here, just so they created jurisdiction. They didn't think that at all at the time. And now, of course, on the back of that, there's all the, conspiracy theories, there you go. But that was literally just because it was a sort of turf war between the feds and the local authorities. The law has actually changed now, so that's actually, this is why the FBI can investigate this one, because that sort of thing, even if it's an attempt, does fall under the jurisdiction of the FBI now, and not actually the state authorities. So yeah, bit of law for you.
So those are our thoughts. Leave us your thoughts below. Do you still think it's some big conspiracy, or do you just think it's some major lapse in the security? Let us know. Thank you for watching, and we'll show you some more views of where we are before we leave.